Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Kinesio Outdoors podcast, where my goal is to educate you on how to safely enjoy exercise indoors and outdoors, inspire you to experience life outside, and encourage you to live a more active life closer to nature. Today on the podcast, I have Aidan Vanhoff. Thank you, Aidan, for joining me, taking the time out of your day. How are you today?
Absolutely. I'm doing well. I've got my cat on my lap. I just had a few slices of pizza. I'm ready to rock.
I like that cat so much. Every time I come over, she just like wants attention, but she'll just like slink around. She's awesome. Yeah. What was her name again?
Her name is Kitty.
That's
She's
right.
very sweet. She's very sweet
Yeah.
and aggressive towards people she does not know.
Uh, I don't know. I've always had good luck with her. I feel like we usually, when I come over, I have my hands in some meat. So she's trying to get some scraps from me.
True.
All right. So,
True.
with that introduction, Aiden, why don't you go ahead and give everybody a background on who you are, what it is that you do. So, my podcast theme is like passionate people outdoors. So, how you became to be so passionate about being outdoors, what activities you partake in, and go ahead and take 5 to 10 minutes to give people an introduction on who you are, because a lot of people don't know who you are. So, go ahead.
So let's see how I got into liking the outdoors. I definitely started very young, interested in the outdoors. Parents always took us kids camping. Uh, I'm the oldest of three. Let's see. I remember when I was really young, I really liked to watch Survivor Man, the Les Stroud guy, the guy who I'm pretty sure that guy believes in Sasquatch, but so I can't vouch for that. But I liked watching those, the Davy Crockett videos. So yeah, that's how I really got into it, and then it just like kept sort of evolving from there. My dad would always take us fishing. My grandparents actually have a cabin in Idaho on a pretty big lake, and so every summer I get the opportunity to go up there and fish. And I guess hunting has always been sort of like I've always been kind of like obliquely interested in hunting, but never really sort of pursued it other than like shooting songbirds with BB guns when I was too young to know that that's pretty messed up. So I don't do that anymore. But anyway, I've always been a big into fishing, but the hunting came when I met a guy named John when I was probably 18 or 19. And he is part of the Blackfeet Nation. And so hunting is very important to him and his family. And the first time I ever had elk was he had gotten home from a hunt on the res in Montana and brought home an elk heart, and I ate that, and I just remember being like, this is a flavor I've not experienced, and you obviously can't buy it, so I'm like, all right, I got to get my hands on some of this, and so I showed interest, and then he graciously invited me into his hunt camp, which is a big deal, obviously. Usually you don't just take any schmuck hunting, so um, he took me on my first hunt, and yeah, it was actually, yeah, it was my first hunt. It was for cow elk, and we all got one, and I was totally hooked from there. I mean, the scenery in the Pacific Northwest is enough to keep you coming back even without success, but that's what really did it. And then like I say, it just keeps evolving. So at first it was like rifle, and then it was um how can I get more days in the field? And that quickly turned into enjoying hunting general season tags because they're always longer than limited draw. And then from there, it turned into archery. Um, and actually, the main impetus for hunting archery was because the season is nearly twice as long, but also because of the ranch that I live on, uh, it's archery only. And gotta hunt the ranch, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Go
on the
ahead.
ranch, I oh sorry, go ahead.
No, 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 go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say about myself. I'm a forestry manager on a tree farm, and the property is has three different designations. So there's the tree farm, the cattle ranch, and we have also a public access aspect to the property because the owner is very generous. Um, and so the tree farm is the largest portion, which is not hunted because there's a lot of trails. the landowner lives in that area, and so that's pretty much off limits. But I get access to hunt a beautiful oak savanna for black-tailed deer.
Yeah, well, thanks for that introduction. You definitely have a unique story of getting into hunting. Most people don't have somebody who has hunting as part of their culture and spiritual beliefs to teach them. So that's definitely something that's pretty powerful. And I think that's really neat. And I think that's something that is shown, at least to me as your friend, anytime you are able to be successful in a hunt, because you save as much as possible. You've tanned your own deer hides and you just, as much of it that you can possibly use, you use. So that's something that I think is pretty cool, especially from somebody who's just starting out. A lot of people, they get their first elk and they're like, oh my gosh, this is huge. And then they kind of leave bits behind. I feel like you're the opposite. You take almost more than you need, and you try to even use the bones for like bone broth, right? So just so many things. That's something that I think is pretty cool. And again, I think that comes from your mentor. So good on John.
Definitely lucky to know John. Anybody who knows him knows that guy is a national treasure. So if John ever listens to this, what's up, John?
He
Probably won't.
won't. Probably won't.
He's not a big podcast guy.
You'll have to tell him that you gave him a shout out. He probably wouldn't
Oh,
like it though. He'd probably be like, "Oh, someone talked about me."
yeah. Did you give my last name? He'd say, no, man.
That's funny.
No, he wouldn't say that.
Well, I want to get more into your hobbies because it's more than just being outside. I feel like you find something for every season and you're successful in every season. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here because although you've hunted for half as long as I have or less, you are already more successful than I am, already put more time in the field, and you've already done as many adventure and kind of different hunts as I have. So I definitely think you're someone that gets after it. But let's just discuss what it is that you do kind of for each season, because each season you do something a little different outside. Let's just start with summer because we're in summer. So typically, what do you do in the summer? And then we'll go fall, winter, spring.
Okay, so summertime is almost exclusively fishing. Um, yeah, so steelhead, love summer steelhead. I prefer it to winter steelhead only because of the weather. Um, I do a lot of fly fishing on small streams. There's a river that runs through the property. I know I'm so spoiled. And so I get access to fish that. What else do I do in the summertime? I
Scout.
do some I do some scouting. Yeah, I definitely so uh we don't need to derail the podcast with a full on story, but I got injured at work last year, and so I'm very limited on what kind of hunting I can do. I won't be able to archery hunt elk this year. That would definitely be taking up at least 50% of my
Mhm.
outside time if I did have an elk tag.
So
Um,
then why don't we go and dive into what you did to prepare for your elk hunt last year to give
okay,
an idea? Yeah, let's do that.
so first, I guess to start at the beginning, most of my friends are rifle hunters, and they drew a tag, a limited entry tag that was very hard to draw. You're talking like 8 to 10 years of saving elk points to hunt this tag, and they had a huge success. They were four of them went over there, and four of them got bulls. It was pretty cool. I wasn't able to join them, but it was amazing. And lucky for me, there is an archery hunt in that same unit. So, and that only takes 2 points to draw. I drew it with one, luckily. And so, first off, having friends with knowledge, I would say, is, I mean, aside from just wandering around, I think that's the best way to get a spot is like knowledge of people with experience,
Yep.
just like, John. So, anyway, that's what led me to draw the tag, which is one of the hardest parts. Luckily, it's mostly public land. The only difference is the rifle hunts in November, and it's in a mountain range hunting migratory elk. So in September, when I was there hunting, they're in a completely different area. So first was using the locations where they got their elk as sort of a conduit for figuring out where they were head coming from, because they're higher up on the mountain in September, at least in the area that I was in. I'm not like generalizing for all elk everywhere, but so figuring out where they were going to be. Once I had done some scouting on, Google Earth and whatnot, I had sort of honed in on a several square mile area that I was going to decided I was going to spend most of my time. Sort of like centered in that was a campsite that I knew had phone service, because that's very important because elk are huge. So, and if it's hot, you need help. Anyway, so I scouted one. I scouted one weekend. Unfortunately, it's about a 5-hour drive from my house,
Yeah.
and so I was only able to scout 3 days before the season. But I did see elk every day that I went. Turns out that the scouting had worked. It was a good year for grass. There was a lot of snow melt. The streams were still full in September. Um, and so I think a lot of those things played a role in the amount of elk I was seeing, because they could have just as easily been on some farmland, several miles away. But they were living in the woods, thankfully, on public land. So I found where they were. When did I go, Stefan? That must have been July, late July.
I think it was late
We're
July.
still in velvet.
Yeah.
They were in velvet when I saw them. The branch bulls were still in velvet. So, um, and mind you, this isn't any elk tag. So anyway, opening day is it Labor Day weekend, right? Is in
Yeah, well,
September.
let's hold on a sec. So in the summer you fish, and then you
Oh
see
yeah.
if you have an elk tag, right?
Yes.
So then in the fall, just a generalization. And from September, give us like, because now we have a lot more to do. So from September to like December 15th, give us like a chronological order of what it is that you do throughout the fall. Because again, you're busy all fall, right? So
That's true.
Labor Day weekend, we can pick off there again. What do you do then? And then end on like December 15th, I think is when the end of fall is for you.
Yes. So, um, let's see. So when I have an archery elk tag, which has been the last 2 years, it it's all elk until the end of the season or until I get one. And that's an easy, even though it conflicts with deer archery deer season here. Um, it actually, the early archery deer season is the entirety of archery elk season. So in my opinion, you need to pick one and do it
Yeah.
and focus on it, because if you try to do both, I think you're going to be pretty much hosed. So it would be elk all the way until the end of September, hunting every weekend. And when I have a local over the counter tag, it's like getting to work early so I can go hunt after work. Uh, Luckily, my boss is nice, and he would understand that if I shot one after work, I could miss the next day. So I understand not everybody has that opportunity, but
Luxury, yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's yeah. Anyway, yeah, all elk. I'd like to do some Chinook fishing, but I'm always elk hunting. So maybe this year I'll be doing that instead in September. So let's see. And then October, I've been pretty lucky here, and I've drawn a antlerless deer tag every year that I've tried to get one. So that's the month of October is doe hunting and packing out does for my buddies, and buck hunting with my buddies, because like I said earlier, most of my buddies are rifle hunters. So I like to accompany them on their hunts as well. Sometimes I don't always get the opportunity to, but when I can, it's fun. And then November is, let's see, November.
I think it's the second half, right?
Yeah, it is the second half, but I'm trying to think, because I don't think I made it out. No, not I didn't make it out last year, but most years I'll go rifle elk hunting with my buddies and help them
That's right, yeah.
pack stuff. And then late season buck starts, which is super fun because I just get to hunt outside my door. And that is just like weeks of me regretting not shooting something because it's very hard for me to let something walk. Uh, 2 years ago, I shot something on the last day at like 3 p.m. So that shows you just how prolific the deer herd is in this area.
And is that the one that Wayne Endicott of the Bow Rack, they put a picture of your broadhead on Instagram?
That's the one. I've actually got it right here.
So Aiden's not a social media guy, at least on Instagram. And he ended up, because the deer dropped, he ended up hitting it in the spine with an expandable. And Aiden was able to
On
recover the
accident.
vertebrae. Yeah, the deer dropped. It's not his fault. And he recovered the vertebrae and then showed Wade Endicott, sent him a picture of it. Did you take it in or did you send it to him?
I brought it in my pocket, which was a bad idea because it ripped my pants, but I did bring it in.
Yeah. So then Wayne was like, that's amazing, and put it on their Instagram. So Aiden's Instagram famous on the Bow Rack's Instagram if you want to check it out.
For what
So
it's worth, I
yeah.
think it was his wife, but yeah, I showed it to
Oh, it
Wayne.
probably was Lisa. Yeah, Wayne doesn't do that stuff. You're right. It was
Yes,
Lisa.
Lisa. I always forget her name.
Yeah.
Very nice folks. Very nice folks over there.
Yeah, they're awesome. So middle of December, late deer season ends. You kind of take a couple weeks off for Christmas, right? Maisie kind of cracks down around the holidays, and then January 1st, you're out again, right?
Yeah, well, actually, last year, I think I caught my first steelhead on December 9th. So because it opens December 1st.
Okay.
So I'll be steelhead fishing as soon as I've got a deer down, or if I don't have a tag, I start on December 1st. Which I'm still there's the learning curve on steelhead fishing is the real deal. I've got some buddies who just really hammer them, but it's fun. I go there and net fish for people most of the time.
See, you say that, and then you send me photos. You sent me probably half a dozen photos of 18 plus inch steelhead. So it's not like you don't catch them. You just maybe don't catch them as much as some of your buddies, but you definitely bring them in.
Well, I try.
So
I'm
when does
getting better.
steelhead end? Because steelhead ends February 16th,
No, no, it's
28th.
so they stop com it's really when they stop coming. They stop running before the season ends. I think legally on the river that I spend most of my time,
Yeah.
it is March 15th or April
Okay.
15th. Excuse me. It's April 15th. But
Okay.
there are some rivers that are year round for steelhead. So um that in that season there's only like a couple months off and then the summers are in. So
Gotcha. So once steelhead's over, once the run is kind of petered out, then it's shed season, right?
oh yeah.
Yep. So then you get into sheds.
I do. I do look for sheds. I look for sheds and I look for mushrooms.
Yep. So
I
sheds and
will.
entrails, right?
Well, I don't have a lot of luck with chanterelles, unfortunately enough, which is kind of embarrassing because that's like the most prolific mushroom in this area. But the morels have been really good around here. I really like black trumpets. I think they're like pretty. I think they get overlooked a lot, probably because they're so little, but they taste kind of truffly. They're not so bland. Like morels are cool and stuff, but if they weren't like so hard to propagate and if they were like easy to buy at the grocery store, and then I don't even think that I would bother looking for them just because they're so bland. But they're exciting to find for sure. Um, but that there's mushrooms in this area all times a year, basically. Uh, yeah. But one thing about shed hunting is I will not skip out on fishing for shed hunting.
Okay. So fishing's first. Got it.
That's a priority of mine. So, but here's the deal. Most of the time in that time of year in the spring, it gets dark so dang early that I don't have time to get to a stream after work. And so
Yeah.
most of my shadowing is done on weekdays. And then on weekends when I have time to drive for an hour or two to get to a fishing hole, I'll make the drive.
So then after both of those have kind of petered out, April 15th, turkey.
Yes, dude.
Yep.
Turkey.
Then we get to turkey season. And
Oh
then
man, I love
at the
turkey
latest,
hunting.
that ends May 31st, right?
Yes. God, I
Yeah.
love turkey
So
hunting.
then it's 6 weeks of turkeys. And then we're at June 1st, and then we're summer, and we have the summer steelhead and salmon, right? They both kind of start around that time.
They do. I haven't done much fishing for salmon, frankly. I just haven't targeted them that much uh, in the summertime. But I'm hoping to get out on some do some trolling this year for Chinook.
Sweet. So that's kind of the year-long summary of what you do, Aiden. And there's really not much downtime. You're always finding something to do. I was talking to my dad after we hung out at the archery range that one time, and he goes, Aiden just seems like he's always going to be outside doing something. And I said, yeah, that's just the way he is.
Your
My
dad's a
dad
man
never
of
got
few
into
words. I take
fishing.
that as a compliment. That's a nice compliment.
Yeah, I'd say it was a compliment. I think he's a man of few words because he just doesn't want to hear any more talking. He hears enough at working from me and my brother and my mom. So I think he
Yeah,
just like everybody just talks, so he just is quiet. But yeah, so
totally.
those are kind of some things that you do. And from the outside looking in, I think you're pretty successful in all of them. I would say you're the most successful with hunting because you got a solo Roosevelt spike. Was that your first year hunting them?
Yeah, with a
Yep, your
bow it
first
was.
year with a bow. And then the next year, you got a 6x6 Rocky. You had a buddy calling for you that one, right?
Correct.
And then two
I
or
owe it all to him. I owe it all to Bailey. Bailey, if you ever listen to this, I'm just a trigger man, dude.
yeah, well, you had to put the arrow in the right spot because, and I hope you mentioned this, there was definitely a time where the arrow was not in the right spot and there was some
Oh,
deflection going on. So we'll have to talk
yeah,
about that. And
yeah.
then 2 or 3 years in a row, you got a doe, right? I think it was,
Uh,
no, you got a buck with your antlerless or your any deer tag, and then you got two does 2 years in a row.
and I got a doe the year before that. I've
Yeah.
filled my antlerless tag every year. I get so lucky on drawing those things, man.
Yeah.
I
So
don't know
4 years
what
in a
it
row,
is.
because I've never drawn one. And then you've gotten a buck on the ranch 2 or 3 years in a row, right? With your bow.
Every year except last year when I got hurt.
Yeah. So in 4 or 5 years, you racked up as many tags filled as many people complete in 15 to 20 years.
You're making
So
me
I
sound
want
like a
to,
serial killer.
what's that?
You're making me sound like a serial killer when you say racked up.
It's like a video game for you, man. You just putting in your time and you're just progressing. You're like
Yeah,
leveling up every year. You're just a little bit better.
I'm
But I
trying.
have talked to some locals around Oregon, and it's not easy hunting. I've hunted rosies 2 years, and I was only within bow range of a bull once in those
Well,
two
you went to
years.
that one spot that I got mine, and you saw one, didn't you?
Not at that spot. Do you remember that place where the people, everybody stops and bugles right by that gate?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I got into one with Brian, and then we told you about it, and he was all excited. Yeah.
Okay,
So
sweet.
I did get into one, but in 2 years I was in bow range of one, and there was no shot. It was too thick, and somehow managed to get one solo. So I definitely want to talk hunting stories. This is going to come out excuse me, the first second week of August. So let's talk some hunting stories. Do you want to talk blacktails first, or do you want to talk elk first?
If we talk blacktails, well, I don't know. Elk comes first
All right,
in the
yeah,
year.
let's do elk first. So get into the story of your giant Roosevelt spike that you're convinced is a 4-year-old spike. I'm still not convinced, but it was a big
No,
spike. I will admit it was
well,
a really big spike.
on the age thing, uh, he's a fork by Spike for one, and for two, I I do not think that it was 2 years old. I'm looking at it right now. I I don't think that I think that I was a little excited when I first told you. But here, one thing I will say is that on the hoof, that Roosevelt was every bit as big as the Rocky that I killed when it comes to the size of, you know, Roosevelts have really big meat. So,
See, and that's nuts because that Rocky you shot, I think, was probably, I would guess him at four or four
yeah, I
and a
don't
half,
know.
technically.
I don't know. I'm not
So
I'm not good at doing that. I should send a tooth in. I can't remember if I kept the lower jaw or not. It might be in my yard.
yeah, maybe you
Because
have
I
to do
think
that.
you have to take it from the bottom, right?
It's the bottom front. Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. Anyway, so
Yeah.
let's get into your story of when you got that Rosie. I was actually guiding at the time, and we were getting skunked and on the Oregon coast, and then all of a sudden you text me just pictures of this bull, and you got it done when there were three of us guides who were not getting anywhere close. So let's get into that story, how you were able to achieve that, and then you got to talk about the pack out a little bit too, because
Yeah.
that was nasty. I've been back there. It's a little nasty down there.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is nasty. Um, but it's always it would be nasty if it was flat. Let's see. Well, I don't know. Where do I start? I scouted a lot, and people always talk scout, scout, scout. Like, yeah, I agree. I think it matters. I also just think spending time in the woods is good, but at least in the area that I hunt on the coast here, it seems like they're never where they are in preseason. So technically, these elk are migratory. I talked to a biologist about it last year a little bit, but not an el- not it's not an elevation migration. It's food based and calf based. So
Hmm.
they'll migrate to calf somewhere that might be the same exact elevation, but it's a farmer's field, and so there's really good feed there.
Yeah,
Anyway,
sometimes some people like Randy Newberg says that they move based on moisture and water
mhm,
content.
mhm,
Because if there's moisture, then there's feed, right? So then if one creek drainage dries up, then they migrate, quote unquote, migrate to, the one over that does have water and lush food. So
that makes sense.
I could buy
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So anyway, I ended up where I got into these elk was somewhere I had never been before. I'd driven past the gate a few times, and this is public access, privately owned timberland. So the way that I found out they were there is one night I was driving back from. I had actually gotten into a herd of cows. There's probably a spike in there, but it was on a weekday, and so I was the only one out in this sort of low human populated area. And I saw a herd of elk from the road. It was so late at night, I had no idea if there were any bulls in there. And so was it the next day? No, it was that. Yes, it was the next day. It was the Monday. So I had taken a week off of work, and it was that Monday morning. I got up to go to that gate, and there was somebody parked there. And so I was like, okay, well, I opened up my maps and I looked, and there, this this like timber stand is like several hundred acres with
mhm.
multiple entrances off of a main highway. And so I went like two gates to, it basically ended up being like a mile to the south of where I had seen them. And so I parked there, and as I was tying my boots, I don't like driving in my hunting boots because they're so stiff and I have a clutch, so it's kind of frustrating. So I was taking off my flip-flops and I was putting on my boots, and a cow runs in front of me in my, it's like probably 5:20 or something. The sun is not up, but it was a clear night, and so the moon was out, and I just see an elk walk in front of my truck at, like, I don't know, 30 yards.
That's nuts.
And so then I immediately started to like overreact, and I got all sweaty and excited. Then I proceeded to bump them immediately because they were all bedded like probably 100 yards from where I parked. Bumped them, and then I was like, okay, well, I guess I won't be seeing them ever again. And I don't know if it was the same group that I got onto later. I'm guessing it was, but it's really hard to say because that time of year it seems to me, I don't have a lot of experience hunting Rockies. I've only hunted them in the rut one time, but these Roosevelt herds are like 4, 5, 6 elk
Yeah.
all running around, and the amount of elk that I bumped was way less or was way more than the group that I ended up getting into later. So anyway, feeling all dejected after bumping those elk, I walk further up the logging road, get to a clear cut, and I immediately, just without binoculars, look across the ridge. How far is it to that knob? Probably
From the
less than a mile. Probably less than a mile. And I just see
from the gate?
no, from when you first get to the clear cut, you look across the drainage up into the Christmas trees.
Yeah, probably about a mile.
Probably about a mile. So anyway, there's just an elk standing there on the hillside, and the trees in this area are, I mean, Christmas trees is a pretty good way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
They're 6 to 12 feet tall. So it was clear cut, 1, 2, 3, 4, probably less than 10 years ago. And so it's really, really dense, very hard to see. It's close quarters, which is perfect for bow hunting. And yeah, there was just one elk I saw. And so I was like, okay, sweet. And luckily, because they were on top of a knob and we live in timber country, that's where they pull all the logs to.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they do in clear cuts. They'll cut all the trees down and then yard them up to a landing and then take them out on log trucks. So I walked around to this landing, which was graveled, was actually very loud. It was really,
Yeah.
really loud, and there was a bunch of hardwoods in there, and so there were maple leaves on the ground. And so I was trying not to walk on the road as much as possible, trying to walk on this mossy stuff, but I was
Mm-hmm.
still pretty crunchy. Anyway, I'd only seen one elk at this point. So as soon as I'm kind of like looking at my phone, like where I put the waypoint of where I thought they were, as soon as I get to like 100 yards, I just start to walk very slow. I mean, like a one step and then listen for a few seconds and then another step and listen. And I finally get to, I'm like, they should be right here. What's going on? Well, there's a fork in the road at the top of this landing. There must have been two landings, which I guess makes sense. It probably had two log decks for that size of a
Yeah.
stand. Anyway, and there is a spike with like probably 3 or 4 feet long spikes, hard horned, bedded in the middle of the gravel road in the shade, right up against a cut bank. And I like peek my head out and I can just see his ass and I'm okay. And then I peek my head out a little further and I determine that it's a bull. And at this point, I don't know what I'm doing. So immediately I knock an arrow and I range his ass. And then I dial my scope or bow sight or bow scope, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that it was like 27 yards or something like that. And the wind was ripping, by the way, just ripping uphill. Morning thermals. And I got to full draw and then just like so dumb. I just backed up and immediately like he got up and ran before I even saw his head when I was going
Mm-hmm.
to shoot. At that point, I just started making cow sounds, like crazy, crazy cow sounds, just mewing all over the place because I just heard thunder. I'd only seen this one spike, but I heard like, oh boy, there's probably like 10 elk here, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had no idea where they were going. So I was just kind of like following their footsteps, like the sound of their footsteps. And basically, they were on top of a knob and they went around this way. I went around the other way. And what ended up happening, and this is why I think this is the only way, the only reason that this worked is because I split the herd. So as soon as that bull spooked and ran around the hill, I ran the opposite way. I mean, literally running. I'm running as fast as I can with a knocked arrow, which by the way, don't do that. Running, running, running. And then all of a sudden I just see calves just squirting out right in front of me. I've got a video of it on my phone. I think that it was like ended up being like 6 or 7 yards that these calves were running by me. And as soon as I saw the calves, I start mewing and the calves just stop and like elk in headlights. They're like, who is that? What's going on? And I can hear elk on both sides of me. I see that really big, tall spike. Can see him. I think it was 88 that I ranged him. Considered flinging an arrow at him, of course, but didn't. And I can still hear some like thundering around me, like to the other side of the opposite direction that big spike went. and this weird sound. It sounded like a dog bark. It was like, boof, just like that, like over and over again. I would mew and then boof, just like that. And so I had no idea. I for a second I was like, is there like also a bear here chasing them? That would be like the craziest coincidence ever. There's no way it's a bear, but I know for sure that elk don't make that sound,
Yeah.
right? So I stop mewing. I see the cows and the calves are kind of just like stopped further down the hill, looking back at me because I was making noise. And obviously they realized one of their buddies isn't with them anymore. Uh, and so I got to check it out. I'm like, that shot's too far, and there's no way I'm going to be able to run them down and then stop them. They've obviously seen me. That half has smelled me by now, I'm sure, but they're just waiting for the rest of the herd. So I immediately just start walking up towards the top of the knob, just listening to see if I can hear any footsteps or anything, and nothing, nothing, nothing. And I'm thinking they're gone. And so I've still got my arrow knocked. I dial my scope back. I think that I dialed it to like 25 and 37 or something. Um, and I mewed, and the woofing started again, and he started coming in. And this is the craziest part. I don't think that, I mean, you don't have to believe it if you don't want to, but basically I had my back up against like a Christmas tree, and I can see his hooves at probably 10 or 12 yards, and he's
Mhm.
walking towards me, and I've got good wind. um, by now those other elk blew out. um, I've got good wind, and he literally pokes his head in through like these Christmas tree branches and is looking around, and he can't see me, and I'm right in front of him. I think I was just like totally, I was kind of freaked out. I mean, it was close. I was listening to his nose like a whistle with
Mhm.
snot and stuff. And he was barking. He like stuck his head and was woof, Still have never heard that sound again to this day. Anyway, I'm like, what am I going to headshot this guy? I'm not at full draw. If I move at all, he's going to bust. And he just stood there, looked around, whatever, and then he sticks his head back out of the trees and turns around, and now I can see his ass at like 10 or 12 yards. And so I was, oh, perfect opportunity to draw. So I go to draw, and of course make a bunch of noise whacking branches with my elbow behind me, and then he just takes off, gone. Like, I'm thinking it's totally over. He runs down a creek, up the other side, and stops in uh, what I found out later was an old burn pile. So there was no trees growing there. It was like a patch the size of, I don't know. I mean, it was probably like a 30-foot diameter circle that he was standing in. And he's looking the other way. Like, I don't know what the heck he was doing or thinking, but I just start mewing. He's faced away from me, faced uphill. And then I'm kind of like mewing over here, down here, facing away, mewing that way, trying to make all kinds of weird noises. Eventually, he turns broadside. And at this point, I've already arranged him. And I was able to take a shot, and he didn't move. He literally shot him. He ran downhill, and then I just heard a big boom, and then that was it. He just, he died in like 40 some yards, the bottom of a creek. So that was that. Pretty
And then
exciting.
the pack out because at that area there's no cell service,
Yeah.
not a chance. So you actually had to walk a mile and a quarter back
Two and a
out to
half.
the big. Oh, it was
It
two
was
and a
two
half.
and a half one way.
Okay, because you
Um,
parked at the other gate. Yeah.
yes, exactly. So what I did was, it was still early. It was before noon, and
Yeah.
it's so steep over here that even at like 11 o'clock, he was laying in the shade just because the ravine was like this.
Hmm.
And so I didn't have my pack frame or anything on me. I just had a hydration pack. So I zipped off his front shoulder. I was like, I got to get something out. I can't just walk out empty handed.
Yeah.
So I got that out, drove down to the road, went to like a little mini mart, bought a bunch of Gatorade, called my girlfriend, very excited, and then called in the dogs to come help me pack it in. And I have very faithful friends on a Monday morning coming to help me out. My dad, who had never been involved with a killing of any game animal, I invited him out and he walked out and got to experience the whole thing. And it was a really cool experience for him. And he brings it up more than I do about how cool it was, because he's like, I didn't know they had that many guts, like things like that, just like, man,
That's so funny.
it looks so much like a horse, those kind of comments.
Obviously, someone who's not very experienced, but that's all right.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I mean, he doesn't need to be. He's not a hunter,
Yeah.
but it made the whole trip that he
Yeah.
came out there, and it's just really cool because I've only ever fished with my dad. It'd be cool to hunt with him, but it's totally fine. I mean,
Yeah. All right. Everybody has their own thing.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a super cool story. I got the message when I was in elk camp, and I'm telling everybody, and they're like, they didn't want to hear it because we were kind of getting skunked, but I was happy for you. I was excited. Super
yeah.
cool looking bull. And so then fast forward a year, you were able to draw that tag, which I I didn't put in for it. I put in for a second choice. I didn't get it, so I'm not too surprised. But I was really hoping to get it because you made it sound pretty sweet. The pictures you showed me of the landscape were pretty cool. Maybe next year I'll try to draw it.
Yeah.
So now we're of last year, 2023. You had the tag, you did your summer trip, and you saw some velvet antlered bulls. Opening day rolls around, and I think do you take the first week off? Is that what you did? The first week of season?
So no, so for the first week of season was Labor Day weekend, so I made the drive that Friday night, and Saturday morning I got into a 5x5. It was at like 9 o'clock in the morning,
That was
and I
opening
just
day, right?
couldn't believe it. Yeah, it was opening day. Tried to kill him, didn't get a shot. And that whole trip was so crazy.
Yeah, you were
It
texting
seems like
me
there's way more elk.
pretty much every
Huh?
day, right? You were texting me every day. I was in Montana having our success, and you were in Oregon having your success, and we're going back and forth. And the whole time you're like, it's a hair tag. Oh, I'll take the first cow. So I'm like, oh, so you're seeing elk. So did you fill your tag it? And you're like, well, no, there's this bull that I really like. And I'm like, I had tagged out second day because I took the first elk. I had an any elk tag too. And I stuck
Yeah.
true to what I said. You got a little picky. So why don't you go ahead and dive into
Well,
that a little bit?
yeah. I mean, to be fair, I did really, really try to kill a cow like 6 days in. I really tried to kill one, and I couldn't even do that. Um, yeah, I don't know. What do you want to hear? Is the so opening weekend? I saw elk every. I saw elk every single day that I hunted over there.
That's cool.
Pretty cool. I'm very lucky, and I'm trying not to get used to it, because I don't think that'll continue to happen. At
I don't
least I
know.
hope it does.
Maybe
It
you're
was
just a good hunter, but I don't experience that.
Dude,
I
it
don't see
wasn't
elk
even my
every day.
spot. It wasn't my spot. It wasn't my spot. It's not all me.
So, anyways, you
And
saw elk every day, 5 by 5 opening morning, couldn't get it done. And then you
yes.
couldn't close on a cow day 6. Then what?
Well, I missed a bull. I missed a bull on my fifth day hunting. The second biggest bull I saw on that trip. My buddy called him in. And the worst part about this call in was that I saw his antlers first.
Yep.
Just like a field goal walking through the woods is pretty intimidating. And he was drooling a lot. And he had a boner, I was just like, there's too much going on here.
It was overstimulating for both of you.
Yeah. Yeah. He was like knocking over trees that like I could just lean on comfortably, and he was like uprooting stuff. Anyway, so he comes into what ended up being 15 yards for a frontal, which I 15-yard frontal, that's like a piece of cake. Everybody's taking that shot. It's a great shot. Well, there was a tree about at the midpoint between me and this bull, and the tree was probably as big around as this screwdriver, like at the stump. And then the limbs were like that, So I'm like shaking, and luckily I was with my buddy, and he just goes, psst, he goes, oh, simmer down.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, okay. So I let down, And then I drew again, and I had my back to a tree. I was doing everything right, which, by the way, wasn't my idea. That's an experienced person told me that, to stand in front of trees and not behind them for obvious reasons. And so I wing an arrow, and I just hear, I hear the arrow, and then smack, and then the bull kind of reacted like he got shot. Well, my buddy who was sitting next to me was taking a video, and you can see right when I release that arrow, that little teeny tiny tree limb just goes boing, 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 boing. So we went and tracked down my arrow. I've got it in here somewhere. I've got white veins, and it was a young ponderosa pine tree, and so that cock vein just sliced right through that tree limb, and you can see a stripe of like sticky green. I didn't even hit it with the broadhead. I mean, anyway. So that was totally a clean miss, which,
Yeah. So why did the bull react like it got hit? What do we know that happened?
the smacking sound was the arrow hitting like a pile of dry wood. It was a pretty aggressive. It was like it sounded kind of like snapping a dry limb on your knee. So it was
Yeah.
like a pretty good crack. Um, Also, maybe he was reacting to that era of the limb bouncing up and down.
I thought the arrow slapped him.
Also, I cow called to stop him. Then he heard the noise and didn't see a cow. That's probably what it was.
Yeah, there
But
was
I
there
don't
was
know.
a lot going on in really close quarters. So
Yeah.
yeah, I missed that
You've seen the
one.
video, right?
Yeah,
I've
yeah, I
shown it.
have. And for some context, when Aidan describes a field goal walking through the forest, I think that was over 300 inches for sure, maybe a 310 bull. It was a
That
pretty
my
sweet bull.
my buddy actually said exactly. He said it was probably 310. That's what he
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, so that's a pretty awesome bowl, especially for someone's second archery elk season. I'd be excited now, and I've hunted archery elk a few more times than Aiden. I think anybody on public land with a lower, a 1 or 2 year draw would be pretty excited with that. So missed that one. Definitely some heartbreak there. That was day
Yeah, man.
5. Day 6, got into the cow, could not close the deal. So what happened day 7?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how many days it took me to to
I
finally
thought it
get the
was,
one.
I thought it was 9.
3. Yeah, nice. You got a better memory than me. It
Day
was
9.
9 non-consecutive days. The first 3 days I hunted, and then I took a week off. Anyway, that's not important to the story. So yeah, it was Wednesday, and mind you, my buddy Bailey. Rest up, by the way, Bailey, if you're listening to this. He's injured as well.
Oh
he
yeah.
he was calling elk in. I mean, not necessarily into my lap every day, but damn near, and getting responses every day. So we were not hunting them by sight or tracking or anything. It was Bailey's calling skills. I need to practice. Anyway, so we had been calling into this group of, it was 4 bulls that were answering us the night before. That morning, the biggest elk that I have ever seen with a tag in my pocket, it was this 8x7 or a 7x7. He had way too much, way too much.
Too much to count.
Yeah, he had too. He didn't need that much. Anyway, he had something like 25 cows, and so that was that morning. Did not get on him, but I saw him like 4 times in 3 hours, and was at full draw a few times. Considered some questionable shots, but did not take them again. I'll save the questionable shots for ground squirrels.
That's funny.
Anyway, so we went back to camp, like we did. We would go back for lunch and to make a game plan pretty much every day. And it's like, all right, well, we already know what we're gonna do. So I ate like three brats or something, took a nap, and we went back out, and it started to rain. And we go back to basically right where we left off. Oh, here's a funny story. On the way in there, there was like this weird pile of scat, and I was like, just my brain being focused on elk. I was like, oh, I wonder how fresh that is. Like I'll stick my finger in there. So I stuck my finger in it, And then I smelled it and I was like, oh, like what is that? That is so gross. And my buddy is like, dude, you can tell that it's fresh. It's like kind of shiny, but I was, tired and whatever. I was like, oh, maybe elk came through here, had the squirts or whatever. Maybe we're going the wrong way. Didn't see any elk tracks around it. We get a little further up the trail and a bunch of coyotes had just ran through. And so I stuck my finger in like a hot pile of coyote, you know, scat. So that's gross.
That's funny.
Anyway, fast forward like an hour and, Bailey rips out a call. We're standing in a dry creek. I gather there's some sort of ephemeral creek there. I don't know if there's no longer water there at all because it seems like there would have been some there that time of year. But anyway, I was walking on river rocks. Kind of looked like nice landscaping, but it's like river rocks and then like these really nice cedars and grand fir trees lining it. And so there's basically there was like a creek and it was almost like it was fenced with like arborvitae or something on either side. So it was a really nice corridor to travel through. And the thermals were ripping downhill in my face, and we were working up this creek. And call response. Something I learned with all the calling that's interesting is that it's surprisingly hard to pinpoint where it's coming from, at least in the environment I was in. The environment I was in was kind of like rolling, it was like rolling foothills with flat benches on top, sort of like these little mini mesas almost.
Yep.
And they can sound like they're on top of the hill when they're in the creek, and they can sound like they're in the creek when they're on top of the hill, depending on where they're facing, because they're really good at projecting, obviously. So once we figured, we're like, all right, think I think he's coming. Sounds like he's getting closer. It's like, oh no, maybe he just turned around and he's like facing us and bugling. But we're guessing that he's like 200-300 yards away. So we're kind of having like a normal conversation. Like everybody's putting in their 2 cents about where he's going. It's just three of us at this point. Anyway, wait, bugle. Is he getting farther away? No, I don't know. And then all of a sudden he bugles, and then we just hear, "Pop, pop, 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 pop," and he just put his what do you call the not
Brow
the eye
tines.
guard, brow, thank you, just stripped like all the and I actually ended up walking past the tree. He stripped all the limbs from like 1 foot off the ground to like 8 feet in the air. And it's like, okay, well, if we can hear that, he is close. He's probably closer than we thought, and he's probably facing away from us from how it sounded.
Yeah.
So immediately Bailey is just like, dude, you need to get up there and set up. So again, all of my elk stories involve running as fast as I can. This time I did not have an arrow nocked. I kept it in my
Lesson
quiver.
learned.
I ran up the creek until I heard him bugle. So I ran up the creek. I got probably like 100, maybe 150 yards from Bailey. He let out a bugle, and then I heard a bugle that was like he was, in my bedroom with me, basically. It was like, wow, that's loud. So immediately I stop, sort of have time to catch my breath, back up against some of those, little cedar trees, basically Christmas trees again in the situation. And then I like just knock an arrow. I ranged some trees. I think I ranged one tree. It was like 15. And then the next one I ranged was like 30. And then I ranged one at like 47 or something. So I put my pins at 20. I've got 2 pins. So it was like 20 and 37 yards, I think, or yeah. So that covers a lot of distance. And then I'm sitting there, maybe only enough time to range. Like I was still going to range another tree, and I heard the clump, 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 clump. Heard him come through, and I see him, which freaked me out. I mean, I'm so glad that I saw like his face and body before I saw his antlers. Like I didn't really take a good look at his antlers at the time, and it was kind of getting dark, and so I couldn't really see him that well anyway. He had kind of dark antlers. And I give him a cow call at full draw, and he turns completely around the other way. I think it was because I cow called like this with my hand, and I think that it kind of projected it back up the hill, like up the creek. And
Yep.
so he turned completely around and then goes to take a full breath, like he's gonna get into a bugle or something, and then I released the arrow. And then I don't know why people do this, but I do it too. As soon as I shot him, I just started making a whole
Meow,
bunch of
meow,
racket.
meow.
Well, I started bugling without a bugle tube, and like it basically just sounded like a witch screaming, and I freaked out. But I like made a bunch of noise, and I stopped, and I heard snap, 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 and then another just a big crash. Um, and then we waited a while, but it turns out he only went 57 yards and he died.
That's
Um,
awesome. Yeah. I
and
think
that pack out was a lot easier. It started snowing actually. It was like the best day for meat care. So we got them all packed out. It was even a shorter pack than over here. I think that it was like just under 2 miles one way, and we did it in 3 trips. Uh, and then there was like a total blizzard on the way back to camp. Like I couldn't drive more than 10 miles an hour because my wipers couldn't keep up.
huh,
Tarped the meat overnight, and it almost froze solid by the time I left camp. So I didn't
that's
even need coolers, until I drive home.
yeah, and there was a plenty of meat when you got back. I helped you unload your ice chests. I remember you were exhausted. I stopped by. I forget why. I think I wanted to ask you something with Brian, and
Yeah,
you
you
were
stopped by with your buddy. Yeah.
yeah, and you were like, "Hey, I really hate to ask this, but can you please help me get this ice chest down? It's so heavy." And it was. It had. I think it had. I think it was like two fronts and a back or something. It was a lot of meat.
I think that it had both of the backs and the back straps in it because I had a shoulder cooler and a
Oh
bump
yeah,
hook.
yeah, yeah. That's
It
right.
was like, yeah, it was pretty heavy.
It was pretty heavy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was awesome. And it's kind of funny. So you said you bugled because so when my brother Nico, when he shot his bull, I didn't bugle, I cow called and I got him to stop. So I don't
Oh,
know.
really?
Yeah. So I don't know if bugling's better, if everybody just does it because like what's cooler, ripping a bugle or like letting off a cow call, right? The bugle's cooler. It's louder, it's a bigger thing. But for me, the cow call worked, and I was able to get his bull to stop actually and let me get a follow-up shot. So maybe next time you might want to consider doing that cow call.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bugle
I mean,
slowed him down, it sounds like, or maybe he
well,
was too hurt to to be bothered to go
I
fast.
don't know. I don't know. I hit him in the aorta. I don't think he was thinking about much, but I wasn't either. I think that I just was like, I had realized that I had finally like, and it had taken a long time to,
Yeah.
find success. And I just wanted to like, it was like a sigh of relief and I wanted to like hoop and holler, but here I am elk hunting and I've got a call in my mouth. So it just came out as, it wasn't even an elk noise, dude. I mean, it was just, what do I do? Better make some noise. Like slow down. I don't know.
You were just
I don't think
breathing
there's
out
any
with
thought
the
that went into
diaphragm
it.
in your mouth.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it sounds like, which is super.
Basically.
Well, I think that's a definitely, well, I think we'll wrap this one up here and then I think we'll get together again and talk blacktails right before late blacktail season. That way people can get a little bit fired up. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know that you're gonna, oh, so you ate, I need to go and make dinner. And I know you've got chores to do. I need to still shoot. So I think we'll wrap it up there.
That
I
boy.
want to say thank you for jumping on here with me, telling some stories. I got to hear some details now that I didn't get to last time because when the girls are around, they don't want us talking hunting for 3 hours.
Yeah, ain't that the
Definitely
truth?
nice that we got to do this.
Yeah. Well, I
Wants
think
to
that's
shoot
because
you.
everything that I tell you when I'm with Maisie, she's already heard before like 6 times.
And she's rolling her eyes. Bridget's the same way.
Yeah.
Bridget's like,
She's
how can
very
you?
supportive though. She loves that I hunt. She thinks it's awesome. So
Yeah,
thank
Bridget
you.
thinks it's cool too, but she doesn't like that every time I tell the story, it gets longer and more detailed.
Right. Yeah,
But real quick before we jump off, you're not on any social media, are you? So nobody can follow you.
that's true.
Good for you. That's cool. So anybody, if you want to hear from Aiden, you can't. He's a ghost.
That's right.
Aiden's actually Bigfoot.
Oh,
All
you should
right.
see me. You should see me when I have my patchy beard.
I've got a patchy beard. For those watching, you can see Bridget has not seen me in 3 weeks. So I told her I'd grow a patchy beard. That way nobody would want to talk to me and I would just be alone without her.
Oh,
Make
three
it work.
weeks, dude.
Yeah. She's been in California while I've been working in my lab this summer.
That's right. Oh
Yeah.
man. Did
So,
she?
anyways, thanks again, Aiden, for jumping on. We're gonna call the podcast quits here. So, everybody, you're gonna listen to this going into elk camp. Good luck. Hopefully, you get some cool stories like Aiden got, and we'll catch you on the next podcast.
Thanks, brother.